Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock practicing necromancer. And tonight I'd like to discuss the Death Altar. There is a lot of videos out there on altars, but not many that discusses spiritualism, especially when working with familiars and deities and ancestral lineages. So, why don't we delve into this for a little bit? Let's first start off is what is a death altar? What is an altar of death? Now, there are two classifications that will come up in your research, not just in your individual practices. In necromancy, you can link a death altar to your patrons, such as a demon or a jinn, a devi, a loa, an orisha. But in historical applications, especially that of working with ancestral spirits or the dead, you can utilize jade. Okay? A, a piece of jade, such as a skull made of jade, or just a block of jade, utilizing a familiar, if you will. Let's say, for an example, you have a beloved pet that you'd like to keep close that has passed away. One of the things that you can do is utilize that jade, utilize a photo of that beloved pet or that individual that has passed away, be it your wife, your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, perhaps a grandfather or a parent. You can utilize this and petition them to be a familiar, to be a guardian, a teacher, you know, just a familiar spirit, basically. And there's two aspects here that one is done through a setup of working with a particular deity. Let's say, for an example, you're in voodoo. Now, you would have, obviously, Baron Samedi, or if you're a New Orleans variation, then it would be Baroness Dimbella. Okay? Now, this particular Loa, or these two particular Loas, are the lower of the dead. Okay, so what you would want to do is to have a photo or a statue of that entity, that spirit, that represents that spirit, and then you would have the hair, an article of clothing, perhaps something that that individual really cared for, that had the essence or that particular favorability, if you will, upon the altar. Now, in this case, let's say, for an example, it's a beloved pet. So you would utilize the fur, you would utilize a photo, perhaps the ashes of that beloved pet. In my case, in 3 months, we lost Ryder at 10 months old. He had eaten something that perforated his insides and was put to sleep. There was no way around it. He died because of that. This was a animal that really loved to eat. He loved to play. He was very friendly, and he was a cuddle pup. He would have been made into a perfect ESA. An emotional support for somebody in need. But unfortunately, he died on June 3rd of 2025 at only 10 months old. And then 3 months later, we lost his brother, Ringos, to parvo at 13 months old. He was my shotgun pup. He was my beloved puppy that, you know, he would get up on the bed, and instead of getting behind you or snuggling with you, he would just flop on your chest, and induce asthma or, an asthma attack or something. But he loved to play. He loved to be paid attention to. He loved long walks, being, shotgun pup, just like Ryder did. He was also an alpha, but he was very, very quiet. I think the only time I heard his voice was when he hurt himself by accident. But so what I did was I utilized Jade. I used his fur, his paw prints, photos, and I set up an altar dedicated to them as familiar spirits. So in this case, I called upon them and petitioned them to be my familiars, my animal familiars, and I awakened them in that manner that allows them to be bestowed with all the power and authority given unto a familiar spirit. Now, in this case, I could use the statue of, say, Pazuzu, okay, as a necromancer, somebody who works with death and surrounds myself with everything and anything that is associated with death, from going to graveyards to hanging out in areas of great turmoil. But in this case, I just wanted it set up directly for them, so that's what I did. Now, like I said, the other application is just the ancestral. Now, there are two cases here that you can really delve into if you really want to learn more about this. The first is Buddhism. Buddhism has a little box, if you will. It kind of looks like a how should I say this? It would look almost like a jewelry box for you ladies. Okay, but it has the two doors that open up, and in Japanese culture, and most of you know that I practice Bushido in the way of and walk the path of a samurai. Now, here it is. You would have a photo of your beloved, okay, be your wife, your husband, your dogs, but you would also have a statue of that particular deity that you worship, like, say, Buddha, for an example. This is a very common altar of death within Japanese homes, the home life. And the dude, welcome. Now, in this case, this is a very common altar of death through Bushido, through either Bushido or through Buddhism in general. However, the other one, like I said, that is common and similar to that of voodooism, as a voodooisant, for an example, they would have the deity of the dead, but they would have a lot of photos of that person or that animal that they would really like to communicate with and to associate with, to pray to. And this is known as an ancestral altar. And you can find this in Shintoism. Shintoism is one that has a rich history as well. Not as rich as Buddhism, but it's there. Every culture, every religion has a death altar. If you go to the Aztecs, for an example, the death altar can be traced back to the ancient Mayans and the Aztecs in general, because this particular altar is set up to worship the Lord of Death, but more so it gives your sacrifice. I mean, look at Christianity for an example. The greatest symbol of sacrifice in Christianity is that of Jesus on the cross. Okay? So this would be considered a statue, if you will, that would be placed on an altar. In this case, look at the churches, look at the Catholics, look at the Roman Catholics. They're always wearing their pendants, you know. They look at Satanism with their inverted crosses, or the amulets of, say, for an example, in witchcraft that has the pentagram. Look at the Kabbalah with the tree of life versus the tree of Da'ath. You know, each one symbolizes the descent of various different applications of life and death. But I think that Buddhism and Shintoism really speaks truth from a Japanese perspective on this, not just as a practicing necromancer. Now, there are applications that you can do within necromancy. Is add in all the ash and burnt incense that you use through rituals. Put them in a bottle. I recommend, say, for an example, a mason jar, or say, for an example, let's go with a an old empty bottle from Fireball whiskey, or say a rum bottle or a vodka bottle. Fill it up with all that ash and surround. It's considered death, and that essence and that energy can be fueled. If you're burning, say for an example, prayers to be sent to them, you can add that into those bottles and just build it up. Any kind of bones, for an example, from human bones, which you can collect legally or illegally. You can get them off websites from other countries. It's just going to cost you a lot of money if you do it that way. If you do it illegally, you'll probably get away with it for a while, but eventually you'll probably get too used to it and get caught by the legal system, especially here in America where everything is surveillanced. Kind of sucks, but it's there. Now, what's ironic here is that there are two applications. You got what is called the houses of spirits. Now, again, you can create a spirit jar, which you can utilize with various different things, such as graveyard dirt, brimstone powder, black sand, a letter or a petition. Let's say, for an example, you draw a seal for for a spirit familiar, be it a demon or whatever, an ancestral lineage, somebody in your family line who has practiced witchcraft or some form of spirituality in the past that is willing to work with you. You can put in a pendulum within that and utilize it. You can charge it, consecrate it, and then charge it and add all the ingredients in, seal it up, and it becomes a spirit house. Now you can take an old box. I recommend going to, say for an example, a cigarette shop, a smoke shop. Go to Hobby Lobbies, someplace that sells, old boxes. Get a cigar box. Get an old box that you can utilize. It has one of those latches, and you can actually utilize this as a spirit box. You can put seals, wardings, whatever you need to do for that. Put skulls in it, surround it with protections and wardings. Maybe some offensive magic. Not just defensive magics that will protect it, but also allow particular types of spirits in to aid you in your path into death magic or necromantic rites and rituals. Like I said, utilize a skull, human skull, animal skulls, bones, anything like railroad spikes, iron, for an example, works marvelously. And you can literally put these into this box and set it up as a spirit box and say, "Hey, I welcome you to come in whenever you want. You can come and go as you please. I petition you to be my spiritual guide, my familiar, my animal familiar, or my spiritual familiar, to guide, teach, and instruct me along the path of my journey. Link them to you as the practitioner." And this is stuff that you can really do that will benefit you in the long run. And Chastity Ann Cunningham, welcome to the channel. So there's a lot of things that you can do as a practitioner of necromancy, or being a witch or a warlock. If you're into the Caribbean traditions, for an example, let's say the African Caribbean, you can go into these and you'll find the Nganga, which is normally created by a Lucerna, a higher up in that tradition, for you as the Polero. If you become a Marimberos, for an example, you can learn to create your own. If you are into the Haitian voodoo or New Orleans tradition of voodooism, you can create an altar of death through ancestral magic. Call upon the Loa to do this. I would recommend a Rada, for an example, Loa, such as you can go with, let's say, Papa Legba to open the gate to the spiritual nexus. If you want to work solely with the dead, such as the deceased, work with Baron Samedi, the lower of the dead. But if you want to work with ancestral, I would go with Papa Gedi from the Gedi family of Loa. But like I said, there's all kinds of setups. There's all kinds of methods that you can employ. These, what I've mentioned here, are just a few things. From voodooism to Shintoism to Buddhism, necromantic practices. Palo Mayombe has them. Necromancers use them. Christians use them, just in different formulations and formats, methods being deployed. But the two main key points of this is communication and prayer. It's a form of honoring the spirit, but also working with the spirit through communication and remembrance. That is what these are for. So this is what an altar of death is. You can give offerings, you can give sacrifices, you can burn candles even. And if you look, I'm going to give you, how should I say this? There's a TV show called Le Dragon, and it takes place in Mexico, basically. It's basically a mafia-type TV series. It's in Spanish. One of the sons takes place, he grew up, and he's working for a Japanese company. He took on a Japanese woman for his wife, and they were happy until she died of cancer, and he ended up going home after his father's heart attack, and he ended up becoming the head of the family. And one thing that every episode has shown while he's building up the empire and honoring his word to the other family members and cartels is he would always be praying at this altar of death. It would show him kneeling down on a pillow, if you will, a throw pillow. And he would have incense burning. He would have a candle going. And it would have a photo of his wife. This is what I mean by an altar of death, especially from a Buddhism perspective or a Shintoism perspective. If you're into necromancy, you can utilize, like I said, the clothes, a photo, something of a belonging, like, say, the leash, the collar, the name tag, perhaps even the ashes of an animal that you loved. Okay. And that is something that you can decide on your own that feels right to you, especially when you get more and more in depth into your practice. Okay. But like I said, I wanted to come under here and kind of just drop some gnosis for you. In this case, I wanted to give you some apotheosis on ideas for you to utilize within your practice. I know a lot of people, they want to come in and they want to become powerful, they want to showboat, they want to get into riches and fame and just a place to belong. But those who really come in and get down to business and want to grow in power and to just work with beings to get better, that's what these videos are for. Okay? These videos are for you who want to get better and want to connect to any kind of spirit. Doesn't matter if it's the recently departed, doesn't matter if it's the deceased, it doesn't matter if it's a familiar spirit. If you want to work with familiars, animal familiars, if you want to work with your ancestral lineage, you know, if you just want to work with just the dead in general, perhaps even demonolatry, become a demonolator. That's what this knowledge is for. And these things like the death altar will help you connect to that current, to those realms, such as hell in Nordic or Norse mythology, purgatory if you're into the JCI, the Judeo-Christian institutions such as Catholicism or Roman Catholicism. If you're into the Orthodox or the Hebrewism, the Judaism, you'll notice that things such as amulets and talismans, phylacteries are going to help you. You can, utilize them to connect with a loved one by putting their photo in with yours. Certain herbs can be used to do this. Death herbs are like lavender, sandalwood, amber. All of these things will help you. Okay? These are just things like any kind of phylacteries, from totems to relics to amulets and talismans. They benefit you in the long run. But an altar of death is a stationary thing that is going to be there for you and you alone in your home for a solitary practice. Okay? If you are in a coven setting, then you'd have to come up with something more beneficial for that setting. And that's something that you and your coven or your temple will have to come up with. But that's a different story. What I discussed here is for you and you alone as a solitary practitioner. A one-on-one or a group type setting where you work with multiple different types of spirits. But if you do that, I would recommend having just one altar for familiar spirits, such as animal familiars, having another one for ancestral lineage, and one for your deity that you work with. Okay, for your everyday practice. Okay, if you're going in just to meditate and commune with ancestral, then light a candle for that ancestral lineage. Petition them to come forth. If you're working and wanting to pay homage to your animal familiars that you are creating or petitioning to be, then you want to have a altar set up specifically for them. That is how you connect. That is how you will benefit in the long run. All right. Leo, welcome, brother. So, with that said, like I said, those are just some ideas for you to work with. It will give you an idea of how to connect to not only familiars, but ancestral as well, and also the deities that you choose to work with. Okay. And like I said, I'm just a practitioner of necromancy. Okay, I am a practicing warlock, a practicing lich. I work solely with the dead. I work with demons and various other types of spirits. But I choose to work mostly with the dead and the demonic. So, with that said, I hope this has been intellectual. I hope it's been educational. It's some of those type of things that I always recommend that whatever you preach, always back it up with numerous sources and always make yourself available to the public because you are responsible for the things that you do and say. All right. With that said, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are into the world. Feel free to hit that notification button. Feel free to hit that subscribe button. It'll help you stay informed and to be up to date when I'm on again. When I upload a video or I do another live, you'll know when I'm on so you can jump on with me. For those of you who have jumped on here during this video, I want to say thank you for jumping on here. It means a lot. And keep those horns up. All right. Have a good day and a good night. And until next time.